Hey everyone, something I want to talk about today is line quality. I noticed that in your drawings you were doing a lot of different kinds of lines, and some of them were working really well and some of them might have been kind of working against you. So what I want you to do is just take a few minutes every day, and you can do this while you're doodling or watching TV or whatever. And what I want you to do is just sort of practice making marks on a page. Use a pencil, don't use a pen. Use any kind of paper, really, as long as it's not too textured, so it can have lines on it. It doesn't really matter. It can be the back of an envelope. What I want you to do is just to, first of all, hold the pencil so that you have a bit of space between the tip of your finger and the tip of the pencil. And what I want you to do is to practice moving from different parts of your arm. So see what happens when you make marks that just involve moving your fingers. See how my wrist is locked and my arm isn't moving? See what kind of marks you get that way. Then I want you to practice moving just your wrist. So your hand is locked, it's holding the pencil and not moving, but your wrist is moving. You'll notice that you're pretty much restricted to these kind of arc-like lines. Then what I want you to do is lock your wrist and your fingers and practice just moving your arm. And this is how you draw those big straight lines, okay? There are ways to practice these different kinds of line works, and eventually what happens is the more you draw, the more you kind of train yourself to be able to do all three at once. And that's that fine motor skill part of drawing, which is really going to improve your work. So the first thing I want you to do, and this is a really fun exercise that you can do anywhere, you're going to take your paper and you're going to draw two random points on it. So one here, let's say. And the objective is to draw a straight line between them in one go as quickly as possible. Okay? So here I go. See, I kind of missed. So I'm going to try again with two other random points. And again, to draw a straight line, I really recommend locking everything up until maybe your elbow. All right? So here I go. So that's pretty good, and the more you do this, the better you're going to get at it. You don't have to go all the way across the page. You should practice going in both directions, so both backhand and forehand. If you imagine you're like a tennis player, you got to develop both of those kind of strokes. And how do you test to see how straight your lines are? Well, there's a few ways you can do it. You can take anything with a straight edge, like a ruler or another piece of paper, and hold it up between the 2 points and see how far off did your line get. So you're looking for accuracy. And you can also test for straightness by holding the line up to your eye like this. And that really makes it stand out in terms of how straight that line got. Let's see, which one of mine do I think is maybe the straightest? Maybe this one, so let's see what that looks like. If I hold it up to the camera like this, you can see it doesn't go side to side too much. So that's the straight line practicing exercise that I'd like you to do. And this is really going to improve your drawing skills, because what's going to happen is all that measuring you're doing, that's putting down points like this. And then the rest of it is using those fine motor skills, using those muscles to actually create the mark with the pencil. Now, the other thing I talked about are called structural lines. Structural lines are lines that you use to measure on your drawing. So they're lines that represent relationships between points in space, but they do not actually represent the edges of an object that you're looking at. So let's say I'm drawing this pair of pliers. Basically what I want to do is, as I measure it with my pencil and I look for those angles and distances and the relationship in space between them, I'm going to draw structural lines that represent those relationships. So I have an angle here between the point and this lower end of the pliers handle. So I'm going to measure that angle, okay? And I can see exactly what angle that looks like compared to the verticals and horizontals of my page, which are now represented by the verticals and horizontals of the video frame, and which you need to learn how to see kind of in your mind's eye, in your frame of view. So I'm looking at this angle, and I'm going to go ahead and draw that angle lightly. Structural lines should always be drawn very lightly. And that's because, let's say you take a drawing to a very finished degree, you're going to want to be able to erase those structural lines later so that all you see are the observed lines. Observed lines are lines that represent an edge of an object, okay? So, as you can see, if I were to draw this observed line, it would be informed by the structural line that I drew in order to tell myself where this is. So whenever I draw a structural line, I need to give myself that information. Here's what's going to represent the tip of the pliers, and here's what's going to represent the tip of that bottom part of the handle, right there. So once I've drawn that, I can either start to draw the observed lines that connect them, or I can keep going with more structural lines. I'm going to do one more structural line because I want to figure out where that is. And if I measure this, I can see that it's on that line somewhere. The question is how far. And one other really good skill to develop is sort of eyeballing proportions. So I can see that it's not quite in the center between these 2 points. It's slightly above and to the right of center. So I want to go ahead and kind of perceive where that is. So I've drawn now what could be called a structural mark or a measurement mark. And I'm going to use that mark in order to connect the drawing with observed lines. So I know that the head of the pliers comes to about where this is. And now's the point where I can start to put in those observed lines. So here's the line that represents the head of the pliers. I've looked at how it behaves. I've seen that it straightens out here and then it kind of curves in. So straight here and then curve in. And I'm still using very light lines. I'm not using heavy dark lines yet. At this point, I can start to come around and curve in order to very carefully describe the behavior of this end of the pliers. Just like that. And I want to be careful about how I'm drawing them because I see that this handle has a thickness and I want to make it look right. So I'm doing it lightly so that if I need to, I can say, no, actually it should be thinner or actually it should be wider, okay? And that's something that you can measure as well. I'm going to continue. Just using observed lines. For this line right here, I think I'm going to go ahead and measure that angle right there. There's a structural line that I'm drawing. It has no terminal points, but it intersects the tip of the pliers right here. And I know, just by looking, that it kind of goes more than halfway to that point. So I want to go ahead and draw it like this. And then I know that it kind of changes direction and goes parallel to this for a while. So, in here, I have to figure out where's all this stuff happening. That's these details on the back end of the head of the pliers. And all this is happening using something called close looking. Every time I come to a different part of the form, I stop and I ask myself, how is it behaving? What is happening here? What is that shape? What angle is it at? And so on. And if you actually want to get better at drawing, This is a habit that you just have to get into. Identifying where this circular part of the pliers is. It's about a little bit left of halfway between these 2 points, maybe actually exactly halfway between here and here. There's the gap. I'm not going to draw any shading or highlights right now, because that's still a little bit more advanced than we want to be today. This part comes down like that. Notice how I just went kind of dark there? Heavier line. That's an observed line. It's a very good example of one. Now I can try and figure out where this point is, let's say from there. So I have this point. That's this right here. So what is the angle here? Maybe like that. And then I need to figure out the angle between these 2 points. So that puts me somewhere here. And then I can start to connect them using this observed arc. The secret instruction for this video is going to be to simply write your name on the paper inside a heart. Write your name inside a heart on the paper, on the drawing somewhere. I'm not going to do it to make sure that everybody listens to the whole demo. Observed lines, structural lines. Measuring angles. That's all there is to it. Best of luck.